but queerness is shifting. It's other. It's liminal. For instance, even Guy and I have completely different experiences of queerness. Queerness is personal, cultural, relational, bioregional even. Like, each experience of queerness is different.
Welcome to Climate Curious, the podcast for people who are scared, bored, or confused by the climate conversation. This week, we're changing it up and have got a very exciting, very VIP guest co-host joining us from the TEDx London crew, the one and only Jamie Windus. Reason being that here on the Climate Curious podcast, we've spoken extensively about how marginalised groups already have most of the climate solutions the world is looking for. And now it's time to do this with a lens purely on the LGBTQIA+ community in even more depth than we've done it before. We'll be asking things like, what's the link between queerness and climate change? How can queerness help us approach the climate crisis in new ways? And why must climate change activism intersect with LGBTQIA+ activism? So, let's get into it. Hi, Jamie.
I think the last time I saw you, Ben, we were in Abbey Road. What a clang.
Honestly, it actually was in Abbey Road, wasn't it? How wild is that? That was during the heat, the height of a pandemic, which was
TEDx London was still churning out sensational content.
Can't stop, won't stop. Bad boy. Take that.
And much like today, they've had me in. They've roped me back in.
They roped you back in, have they? So, sorry, for everybody who's listening, hello, welcome. For context, we've got a very special episode of Climate Curious today. And we also have an even more special co-host for this episode, immutable Jamie Windus.
Bow, 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 bow.
Can you please insert some applause there, Jamie? How are you doing? How's life going? I feel like you're living to the max at the moment.
It really is to the max. No, I'm all right. I'm very happy to be back. I love a podcast, and I normally don't have such high tech qualities. I've got a real life microphone, Ben.
Listen, see, we're doing it for this is it. We don't do half measures here. Do you know what I mean?
No. Mariam wouldn't have it.
No, she would not. And we've got a really interesting guest today. Mariam's so good at doing this bit, right? Because she always has a slick intro to what we're talking about. But I really don't know what this is. So I feel like you know the guest more than I know the guest today.
Shall I do a sweep in?
Talking to? Yeah, give us a quick overview of what we're doing.
Now, I know you're excited because I'm here, Ben, but we've got two people who are much more exciting than me, which is difficult in 2022.
It's very, very difficult.
These two guests today are going to rock your world because I know a little bit about them, but I think everybody is going to be blown away. So we are joined today by Guy Ritani and Toad, two people with the best names on this planet.
Of all time.
And not only on this planet, they look after our planet because they are the co-founders of Permaqueer. Now, their work revolves around finding cultural reciprocity within our ecosystems, both in a traditional and a contemporary sense. Now, Ben, I see your slightly puzzled face. I also see mine. So let's get into it and find out exactly what they get up to. Are we ready? Yes. Everything is on green light, so go. Now, today, Ben, we are joined by Guy Ritani and Toad, who are not just two people with sensational names, but they're co-founders of Permaqueer, another sensational, that could be a band. I'm just saying, if this doesn't work out, I think they should put this into a band. Anyway, their work revolves around finding cultural reciprocity within our ecosystems, both in a traditional and a contemporary sense. So, hello, Guy and Toad.
Hello. Thank you so much for having us.
Hi, y'all. How are you doing today?
Good. A little bit tired. We've had a really wonderful week.
Okay. So Jamie just said that Permaqueer sounds like a band name. And I feel like you've done the strongest PR job ever of all time, because I don't know what's going on here, but I want to be a part of it. Permaqueer, what is that? What do you do? Who are you? What does that mean? But let's start with, what does permaqueer do? I think that's a nice intro question there.
Yes, that's a great place to start. So permaqueer, the name, is a combination of permaculture, so the permaculture design methodology, and queer, coming from queer theory. And so we as permaqueer use the guidance of queer theory applied through permaculture to create a queer, ecologically designed approach to how we engage with our food systems, our social systems, and just systems design in general. So that's sort of the nebulous part of it.
Okay.
But basically, yeah.
I feel like you can see on my face that I'm like, what does this mean? so we got to go step by step. Jamie, go for it.
Ben, you've got this. Deep breaths. Hold my hand through the power of Zoom. Okay. You will understand. We're all on a learning journey.
Right, good.
So, one of my favorite things about how you approach your work is, talk to me about the way that you define the word queer in your work, because I think a lot of people think that when the word queer is attached to something, it's inherently just about sexuality or gender identity. But talk to us about the way in which you combine your definition of queerness with climate activism and climate change.
I really, really love that question, because people always wonder, like, why do you got to make it gay?
Why it got to be gay, though?
It's true.
It's true. For us, we orientate queer and queerness and queer theory as almost a design methodology. In the same way that feminism arose from women's studies, but applies not just to women, but to many different areas of life, so too does kind of queerness and queer theory arise from LGBT plus studies, but is kind of used elsewhere. I like to nerd out about it and talk about it, but there's actually a really great quote I'd love to use by Bell Hooks, because you can't beat Bell Hooks, to be honest.
You can't beat a bit of Bell.
You cannot. Saved by the Bell Hooks. Queer, not about being as who you're having sex with, although that can be a dimension of it, but queer as being about the self that is at odds with everything around it, and that has to invent and create and find a place to speak and thrive and to live.
So for me, queer is so nebulous, and I like to explain it as, when you get like a filament on your eye and you try and look at it and it keeps moving away.
Oh my gosh, that's such a good explanation.
Yeah, right?
Oh my gosh.
And we look at queerness as the edge of innovation and creativity that you can't quite grasp. And it's ever evolving. And I think in a world right now where we're facing such difficulty because of the social norms that we have, having a design approach that is imaginative, that is new and is innovative, is where we need to be. And so that's what houses queer for us. It's this growing vital edge of regeneration and love and care.
And when we talk about queer as well, we often use it as a verb of like queering. And this was given to us by a fantastic woman named Hannah Breckbill. And she was saying that queering is, as she orientates it, is the interrogation of social norms, which we all understand that kind of to be as, but also redesigning systems to better meet the needs of kind of diverse communities and yourself. So it's interrogating it and understanding what works and what doesn't work, and then recreating systems to better meet the needs of all.
Okay, so queerness as the idea of like being on the cutting edge, the squiggly thing in the corner of your eye. I get that. I've got a question for maybe the people in the back. Shout out to all my people in the back. I feel like I should know the answers to this. But in terms of permaculture, What are we talking about? What is, because I think that's the other piece of the puzzle, right? Is like the queer piece and the permaculture piece, and then merging them together. But I'm not sure what you mean when you say that.
Yeah, thank you. That's really, yes, it's very clear we need to define that. So permaculture is a design methodology that came out of some academics in Hobart in Australia in the 1970s, which is a combination of agriculture, ecology, and what's the third one?
Land management.
And land management. So it was, why do we have these three areas of sort of study when they actually intrinsically have a sole role together? And so permaculture is a ethical design methodology based off of earth care, people care, and fair share. And it uses principles to apply how we engage with our lives and with systems. And so it's a really, really powerful tool set to orient ourselves in a sustainable and regenerative way.
And where, in the ways we've kind of made it a bit queer, we're trying to queer permaculture, is that it's hugely applicable to a lot of communities that otherwise don't have a lot of control over resource redistribution or access to resources. It has really fantastic applications there, but typically in the country of so-called Australia, where we're speaking to you from, it's typically practiced by middle-class white Australians who have land. And in terms of housing here, like a lot of the younger generation will never have access to land stewardship or land ownership. So for us, we're really looking at the ways in which we can apply it in the suburbs, within communities, in kind of transient spaces, to kind of really get some food security and housing security for diverse communities.
So what was the journey for you into understanding permaculture education and understanding queerness, and then believing that those two things, one, were important and two, belonged together? How did you get from wherever your starting point was to this point?
Yeah, thank you.
It's quite a funny story, really.
We had a pretty natural sort of emergence, which is why we love permaqueer in this sort of space that we're in so much, because we didn't really create it. We just sort of happened to fall into it. And so when COVID hit Melbourne, which was the most locked down city in the world, we ended up going, a whole lot of people lost their jobs. I'm not from Melbourne or Australia, so I didn't get any social welfare, didn't have any income, but we were living in a permaculture transition house. So it established community accommodation systems, it established community food systems, it established these bartering economies between our neighborhoods. And so actually losing my job and having no income in a time of pandemic, I was actually fine, which was incredible, because there were a lot of my friends who had, larger incomes than me, who had more security, were actually devastated, and they ended up having to move countries. And we really recognized that because of these systems, we had so much structural systemic resilience. And we recognized that this kind of designed support, socially designed support, doesn't exist that much in marginal queer communities. And so we just started thinking, hey, what happens when we apply this within a queer context? So it started initially with just us in queer communities of color, and it kind of grew from there. And so now we've brought permaculture into the queer community to try and resource them, but it's gone both ways. We've actually brought queerness into permaculture and sort of ripping up the carpets of that foundation at the moment. Yeah.
Right.
I don't think you can really touch one thing without the other thing touching you, and I think that's really happening in really exciting ways. And I think the really exciting thing for us is when we were living in that transition house, we'd only ever heard of permaculture as this thing that you can do if you're like living out on like lots of land. But like where we were living, we were part of a local dumpster diving food redistribution network, and that was a permaculture design. So earth care, we were taking like food out of land care, people care. We were getting actually, we didn't pay for groceries the entire time we lived in that house. And fair share.
What?
Yeah, we dumpstered all our food. We went to a very, very high-end department store, which had a big
Wow.
front facing, like they would just turn out all their stock.
Yeah.
It was actually our second date. I took Guy dumpster diving, and Guy was a
That is
corporate
so
queer.
romantic.
God.
He was a corporate queer at the time. We hopped into the bins. Recovering corporate queer.
Yeah.
I hopped into the bins. I pulled out bouquets of roses and like champagne as well.
So here's the goop, right?
Yeah.
You know, these giant, you know, food systems that have all these bougie displays and cheeses and everything, they set them up one day to look opulent, and they have to maintain that brand of opulence. And so there's so much food that gets wasted. And it was this
Because cheese dries out.
Yeah, you know?
We all forget.
It's a really relatable, it's a relatable statement to, just constantly having to serve opulence. It is, I feel like I personified the incredibly environmentally dangerous cheese shops of Australia.
That's you.
Yeah.
And it's true. That's so amazing, though. Did you find that, like, bonded you together, in a sense, dumpster diving behind a huge chic department store?
Yeah,
I love that.
Trial by fire, because I'm a feral queer through and through. And Guy has a lot of taste, and I can't say that I'm a very tasteful creature. And I think I'm learning. So I think that it was a really bonding moment. And then like it was just the joy, and the Guy was earning a good budget, like a good income
prior to COVID.
And like we were eating meals that Guy wouldn't have been able to afford. It was part of their average thing.
It was just astounding. And so this sort of dumpster food aspect is just one example of how poorly designed this system that we live in. And it's not just food that's being hemorrhaged. There is accommodation that's been hemorrhaged there because of the structures of how we have, landlording or Airbnb or, the housing market. And when we have an ecological design system that we can apply to the system we have, all of a sudden we recognize why this hemorrhaging is so bad. And so this example of these masses of food that are going to waste, these are resources all across the world in so many different forms that get hemorrhaged again and again by design. So it's not actually anyone's fault. Like it's people just, we've inherited this structure that's inherently damaging and destructive. And, there's actually a better way to do it. And we've been sort of trying to figure out what that is.
And speaking to good design a little bit, when you're actually able to, as part of this redistribution network, we were getting incredible food that we never would have been able to purchase ourselves. We're doing something good for the earth. And we actually just set up a little cupboard at the front of our house where we put our excess food in. And during COVID, that was feeding a bunch of people. And then other people were coming in and bringing gourmet mushrooms that they'd grown, bringing people were mending socks and putting them in. That people were just sharing all this stuff. So just passively, by good design, getting rid of our waste, we'd actually accumulated a huge amount of social currency and just become really embedded in community and built community up just by making good design instead of intentionally bad design.
So you're essentially getting free dinner and having a food bank for the whole community.
Right? Yeah. How does that work?
Your house.
Yeah.
And making a little sock shop.
Yeah. And it's funny because, when we lean into this beautiful regenerative queer culture that we're trying to vision, we actually get so confronted with, we constantly believe that someone has to lose. And somehow we were in this space being like, how are we fed? How are we feeding everyone else? And how do we not even have to do that much work to do it? And so we're just like, okay, we really got some shitty rubrics to how the world should work if we just expect someone to lose at some point.
Yeah. It's like that broken... that feeling of coming out of the matrix or coming into the matrix. I'm not sure which way round it works, but taking the pill and being like, oh my gosh, everything's broken. This doesn't work. And there's quite easy solutions to it.
Yeah. Do you feel like this is why? Because hearing that is why is the world not doing that?
Right.
And it's. I think for us, thinking about this question, it's the world doesn't approach things intersectionally. And so would you say that that's why the intersectional approach to the work that you do is so important, because it creates that community, creates that basis where you can get free gourmet mushrooms.
Yeah. And in this sort of system that we exist within, we like to box and package people so that we know what to expect from them, so we know how to communicate, so we know how to, do things. But when we stop and actually hold space for that complexity and that intersectionality, which we actually don't know about, which for us is that edge of queering, we sit here with a loving interest as, what is this weirdness about you? What is this difference about you? And when we look at that from a sort of permaculture and ecological lens, that we call that diversity. And in ecologies, the more diversity you have, the more resilience you have in an ecosystem. It's able to support itself. It's able to generate more resources or relationships. And so when we are able to posture ourselves in that intersectionality, with wonder, with love, with care, backed by an appropriate design approach, all of a sudden we can start using the gifts of the people or cultures or intersections that we engage with. And everyone is, born head to toe with gifts, culturally, ancestrally, just chocker. And right now we're kind of in a space that's difficult to engage with those because of the way that our society sort of postures people.
A really literal example that I can think of to illustrate that is they often bring autism coaches into schools here, particularly when kids with autism are struggling. They'll bring these coaches in and they'll kind of restructure the classroom and a few other things. And you'll absolutely see that the kids with autism do better. But not just them. The kids without autism do significantly better as well. They're just the canaries in the coal mine. And actually having people with diverse lived experiences, they are like an absolute necessary piece of any design, because they're the ones who experience the feedback that's invisible to everyone else. They're the canaries in the coal mine that can smell the gas. And they're the people who need to be listened to the most in terms of the shifts that need to be made towards a society or a design that better meets those needs.
Right. It's this idea of centering people who exist on the margins being better for everybody within the whole.
Yes.
Which I love as a way of being. I don't embody it that much, but I love the idea of it. But one of the things I've really enjoyed about this conversation so far is that it feels really close. I think when I heard the name permaqueer, I was like, wow, this is going to be almost in my mind, big pharma, massive industry. Do you know what I mean? A huge operation, but it sounds so localized and grassrootsy, which I'm really appreciating. And we had a question about the urgency of the climate crisis, and I think that's an important question. But what I am really, really interested in is what your day-to-day looks like, because it sounds it sounds like you're doing loads of different things all at the same time.
Are you back in the dumpsters?
Yeah.
Are you sewing socks? Are you?
Yeah. No, a week for us is just full of contact with so many wonderful and different communities that are doing different things. For example, we're working on a project called microcycling at the moment, which is where you divert natural waste resources from landfill, and they go through a sort of myceliation process, which is the root of mushrooms, to grow into new products or packages. And you can get medicinal mushrooms out of them, you can get edible mushrooms, and you can also get the root structure that creates a material that can work with. So that can be packaging, it can be fabrics, it can be paper. And this is just one emanation of a really freaking cool thing that's happening within one community that actually needs to be held, and it needs to be paid attention to, and it needs to be connected with other networks. And so what and that's one thing over here that happens, and then over on the other side, we have, Center for Regenerative Arts, where we have different diverse artists and communities coming from cultural perspectives about how they vision what the future looks like. And while these two things kind of seem completely irrelevant relevant, they actually tie together because we all exist in this community and we all need the same resources at the end of the day. And how we design and situate ourselves around those resources is really important. And so sort of day to day for us, it looks like going along to little mushroom sessions somewhere or going along to little art dreaming sessions.
As we move to the end of our time, which is making me incredibly sad because I know maybe flying to your part of the world isn't appropriate, but I would actually, you've convinced me to maybe walk there, which sounds about right. If everything goes right, so if everything we've talked about here, we've all got our mended socks on and we're all eating our delicious gourmet mushrooms, which I just, side note, hearing you say about dumpster diving, I also live near quite a chic little boutique, like supermarket place. Would it be bad if I jumped in the bins? No.
Just record it.
Would the paparazzi see?
I want to listen to your experience as you do that. Yeah.
Sure, my own little podcast series. If we do everything in the next 10 years, so we're in 2030, we all still look incredible. What does that look like? What do you imagine the world to look like? Do you want more people to join? Do you want your message to have expanded? What does your 2030 look like?
I want to be irrelevant. To be honest, and I think this comes down to queerness and the idea of the shifting thing. And even the value system of white supremacy, we try to orientate it and look at it and name it and then fix it at one point. But queerness is shifting. It's other. It's liminal. For instance, even Guy and I have completely different experiences of queerness. Queerness is personal, cultural, relational, bioregional even. Like each experience of queerness is different. So as this keeps shifting, so too do I want it to be. I want people to look back in 10 years and think, oh, you said some problematic shit. And like for it to have moved that much, you know what I mean? I really want it to be continually evolving and changing and shifting. I don't want to be still here, still like, banging the drum, trying to lead a movement or do anything. I want to be retired. You know what I mean? I want other people to have picked up really cool work and in ways I couldn't even imagine.
Yeah, I think for me, when I think about where we're at as a world, we've spent so long, post-industrial revolution building infrastructure, and we've kind of not come to a point where we've recognized we just don't need to do that anymore. We've got so much of it. We've got the designs. It's just sort of run away because of this sort of capitalist need to grow. And I hope that in 10 years, I don't know, I can't go back to my childhood, but I feel like the world was more trusting. I feel like there was less anxiety in the breath that everyone breathed in. I feel like there was less difficulty. And I think that's because the systems around us are failing. And so a lot of the things are a lot more tense. I want food systems to be distributed within communities. I want social welfare to be on a local level. I want councils, regional councils, to have such a greater and more significant role with the communities that they engage with, because right now we outsource all of these decision makings to a level of governance that is so far removed from the experience of my life that I don't even know why I expect them to represent me. And I believe when that happens, we will trust more. I believe we will be healthier. We believe we'll be happier. And I believe that the art that is created then will just be amazing.
And you said something that really, really kind of didn't strike a nerve in a good way, I want to say. But you were talking about how the anxiety is happening because these systems are failing. I want to see good systems. I think shifting all the responsibility onto consumers to do the right thing is not going to work. I want to be able to go down to a shop and buy something, and without even second guessing, knowing that this contributed to the planet and contributed to communities in fair and equitable ways. So it's not just that we ourselves are improving, but the systems that we exist within are just inherently geared towards right relationship.
Yeah, I love that. It's like a mixture of representation and rest and better systems and retirement.
Yeah.
That is a 2030 I can live in. I can move towards that. I like that idea. Thank you so much for sharing that, and it's really in line with the conversation we've been having, right? Like this idea of like and not just us doing more work, but like an actual world that is actually better and functions in a better way for everybody who lives within it, and therefore solves a multitude of evils in the process of doing that. And now it's time for our climate confessions. Let's fess up to the bad habits we just can't kick. So, this is the part of the show where we ask our esteemed guests to share something that they are maybe not doing so well within the climate movement. Saying, don't worry, Jamie, you got to do it as well. So
I've got a long list.
Okay, and I'm not gonna lie, you two sound like absolute angels at this particular moment in time. So I am personally quite deeply invested in hearing where you're not doing a good job. So if you've got any thoughts, and maybe Jamie, you could start us off.
You've shared all of your sins.
Jamie, go first.
Well, as a special co-host, I feel like I can be let off the hook slightly, because as this is a space for not new people, obviously it's not like I've just heard about this. No, it's this cool climate trend. But as someone who is definitely in the beginnings of that journey, my confession is I need to stop seeing things on mannequins in shops and thinking, I need that for a job that I'm doing. I must buy that suit. If you could see my wardrobe, I have so many suits and so many roll necks, and that's all I own, which is not appropriate because it's getting hotter. If there's anything we know, it's getting really hot. And two, it's just fast fashion. So my climate confession is stop buying fast fashion too much. And there's so many amazing reseller apps that I've been using recently that are not only cheaper, but you get to see someone else in it. It's like I'm living. It's a historical garment now. It's a historical,
a passed on memory. You're part of a history, and maybe you can cut the sleeves off of the suits for summer. I don't know.
Don't be blasphemous.
No, never mind. We'll keep it moving. Okay, over to you. Either one, Toad?
I buy too much like plastic and silicon-based lubricants. That's my confession.
Sure.
I used to manage an adult store, and I have yet to find ethical-based like sex products.
Okay.
Yeah.
You've yet to find them, or you've yet to find ones that you like?
And this is the thing. I'm doing other stuff that I'm just add this to my little basket. I'm gonna take it away.
Right.
I haven't done the research, and I'm sure it exists out there. And I would love to see some kind of queer, ethical, kink, emerging business or something that I can throw all my money at. That's what I would like.
I could see this outside in the little. You've got your socks, you've got your gourmet mushrooms, you've got your
upcycled
your lube.
Props.
Yeah, your water-based lubes. Yeah, it's important. It's important, and I appreciate the honesty. Thank you very much for sharing.
Yeah, I feel like I have like a whole bunch of things I want to get off my chest now. I'm like, look, this is the opportunity to get out. I have a keep cup and I don't use it. But I feel like that is just like
a keep cup.
That is the most virtue signaling thing of having it and not even using it. And like every time I see it, it's this reminder of like every single coffee cup and mug that I just get, and it goes into like somewhere.
I do the same, but I don't even just buy one keep cup because they're quite beautiful. I buy a collection of keep cups that I never use. So there's just an increasingly like hodgepodge collection of like handmade ceramics and these, and there's just like my bin is filled with these like cups.
Is it because they take too long to wash. That's why I don't use them, is
Yeah.
because I feel gross if I have like a milky coffee residual cup in the bottom of my little bag. I'm like, that's rancid.
Weird, yeah.
Mine's
yeah.
ADHD and executive function. I have like two monkeys like fighting each other for my kind of organizing of thought. So I just run out the house and I'm like, I forgot the thing again.
Yeah. Yeah, I suppose just responding to the I love that we came across as angels. Keep that branding, we'll love it. I will shatter it for a moment because, we love working in this space, but it's so iterational and we can only be as sustainable as our environments allow us to be.
Right.
When the only food available is wrapped in 5 layers of packaging and when, the only transport available is fossil fuels, that's actually not on us. Well, it's on us as consumers, it's also not. And so, with this confession, I'm also shamelessly going to be like, we're all in motion, and that's okay. Yeah.
You just queer theory in the whole podcast.
Yeah.
You can't do that. That's cheating.
Come in. Yeah. Goodness. Yeah.
No, I agree with what you're saying. I'm not even going to try and add anything to it. You are correct. And we are at the end of the podcast. So thank you both, Guy, Toad. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
It's been a wonderful conversation.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having us. I think it's really, really wonderful that you're platforming, small community initiatives. And while that's not exclusively what we are, that's where the solutions come from. So it's just wonderful to be a part of this podcast and to connect with all of the stuff that you're doing. And I'm really grateful that you're creating an accessible format for a lot of people who don't live in this weird echo chamber of ecology that we're in. So thank you.
Thank you so much for joining us this week. We really hope you enjoyed this episode.
If you did, please rate, subscribe, and share this episode with a curious friend. It makes it possible to keep making this amazing content for you.
Oh, and slide into our DMs at TEDx London and let us know which climate extraordinaires you'd love to hear from next time. But wait, that is not all.
No, this podcast was produced by the amazing Josie Coulter.
Curation and research by the genius Tara Cooper.
Artwork designed by the visionaries that are Sabrina Russo and Rebecca Mingus.
Mixed and engineered by the iconic Ben Beheshti, aka The Falcon, who also composed our banging theme tune.
Presented by me, Mariam Pasha.
And by me, Ben Hurst. Stay curious.